how much of that do we attribute to each intervention. So we've been trying to do more around measuring individual components. But yeah, in terms of how we use the evaluation, there's been a number of things, and actually some of the most useful stuff has come out of the qualitative data, because often that's where you'll notice that quite a few respondents will be talking about the fact that, I'll just give one example. We had assumed during a lot of Keep One that it was really fathers that were making the decisions about keeping girls out of school, because, in many communities, like, the fathers control a lot of the resources. But one of the things we learned towards, I think it was the end-line evaluation for Keep One, was that mothers play a much bigger role in deciding whether or not girls go to school, largely because it's mothers, even though fathers control the resources, mothers decide who does the chores. And so if a mother assigns the girl to do all the chores, and then she has to stay out of school as a result, then that's quite a big problem, whether or not the physical resources are available. That's just one example. Things like that. We make these assumptions, and then during the evaluation, it'll come out that, like, actually you see that quite a few girls are talking about the fact that it's their mom that wants to keep them back and keep them out of, but not they mom go to school, but it's if we want to influence or improve the odds of the girl go to school, it's probably the mother that we need to be talking to about maybe spreading the chore burden out a little bit. So there's a lot of stuff like that come out of the qualitative component that we've been able to use kind of right away. Like, for example, once we found that out, then we kind of changed some of our we've changed the targeting of some of our, like, radio outreach programs, for example, and the community outreach that we do. So it's less focused on. So it's less focused on the fathers and more on the mothers.
Okay, that's a really powerful example. I'm curious about, you said especially from the qualitative, your team learned a lot. Can you just tell me a bit about how the qualitative was presented or communicated that you found so persuasive or, just powerful? Because a lot of times as evaluators, you'd kind of just throw in a quote here and there to illustrate a point. I'm just curious if anything stands out in your mind about the qualitative, just some specifics.
I think, this is really basic, but, like, just the ability to, summarize and say, look, this is the general, having done however many focus groups or whatever, like, here's some common themes that came out. And, being able to just sort of condense and then highlight, especially to be able to highlight themes that are a little bit counterintuitive or run counter to some of the assumptions in our theories. That's quite useful.
Okay, that's good. Sorry, I interrupted. Were you going to say something?
No.
Okay. Were there other examples of use that you wanted to share?
Sorry, what other examples of what?
And other examples of evaluation use, and the ways in which it was used.
Okay, let me think. Okay, yeah. So another thing that's kind of really substantial is during the midline of Keep One, one of the things that came out really strongly, and again, this was largely, I think, in the qualitative, was that we were sending out sanitary pads to girls, and so all girls received sanitary pads, like a certain number at the beginning of the term, to make sure that they weren't missing school, because of because they were on their period. And that was just, we did that for 4 years. But then one of the things that came out at the midline was that the biggest value to the girls and to their families was the fact that not having to buy sanitary pads freed up money that could be used for other things within the household. So it was like, okay, the sanitary pads are useful, but what's really useful is having a little bit of extra cash that, can be used for other things in the house. And so, a combination of that and the fact that the purchasing and the procurement of all these pads is like quite inefficient. We just decided and then of course, there was lots of literature around cash transfers and then effectiveness. So we decided let's try, if the major benefit of this is actually economic, let's try at just providing straight cash and let the girls buy the pads themselves. And so that's what we ended up doing. In Keep 2, we switched from buying girls pads to just giving girls cash. And another thing that influenced that was the fact that, and this was both quantitative and qualitative, but our data showed that in Keep 1, there were some girls that were really benefiting a lot from our interventions, and then some girls that were basically kind of slipping through the cracks that for whatever reason didn't seem to be very effective. So we had, if you look at the learning data, there was a cluster of girls that were doing relatively well over the course of the project, and then another cluster of girls that basically didn't seem to be impacted much at all. And the kind of theory that came out of this was that basically there was a group of particularly marginalized girls that for whatever reason either weren't attending school often enough to take advantage of these opportunities or whatever else, but they were just kind of right down at the bottom of the pyramid, and as a result we weren't getting. So one of the things that they recommended at the end of the one inline was we need to, rather than just do a one-size-fits-all approach, is what we're doing for handing out sanitary pads, and a lot of our interventions was just okay, we give everyone the same thing. We need to be much more tailored and focused and identify the girls that are the most at risk and then support them more. So it's kind of more of an equity approach. And so in EQ, that's what we're doing, and we now have a marginalization index where we use a number of different economic and social factors to identify girls that are particularly at risk, and then we provide cash to them, cash transfers to them. So again, that's just an example of a finding from the end line that we're okay, this is clearly there's something here that we need to learn from, and we kind of modify the project design as a result.
Yeah, that's great. So early on in our conversation, you told me that you do, different kinds of evaluations or even research. For instance, that study that was done, and then you also do your internal, assessments and things to track how components are doing. So I'm just curious in terms of value of the evaluation, which evaluations or research or whatever you want to call them have you found to be most useful? Is it this big baseline, midline, endline, or is it the internal ones that your team does to investigate specific issues, or is it the research?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think the most useful stuff is, and obviously I'm biased, but I think the most useful stuff is the stuff that we do ourselves, because it's very targeted to answer a question that's important for us. So I'll give you an example. We recently came across an organization, a Kenyan education technology firm called Eneza, and they do SMS-based tutoring service. So it's all based around the Kenyan curriculum, and it provides, for a small fee, the students can sign up and they can do quizzes and stuff via text message, and it'll be matched to what they're learning in various subjects. So it's supposed to